financials. Like, do you guys spend a lot of time thinking about your competitive set in terms of like growth? How do you think about as you look into the next year and beyond, kind of growth for the business? Like, what are the things you're focused on? I think we're ready to jump in. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Facebook Friday. It's Keith Watts, head of industry at Facebook for real estate. And of course, my phone's ringing right as we start this, but that's the nature of doing this live. I'm so excited for the two guests I have today. I have Sue Yannicone, who's the CEO of Realogy's franchise group, and Simon Chen, who is the EVP of product and innovation. Both have been at Realogy for a long time in various roles. Both are real estate experts. And so super excited to dive in. And for folks who are just joining, the point of these sessions is really to allow the LabCoatAgent community to hear directly from executives within some of the top brands within real estate, and talk about what that intersection of being an agent with technology, with the crazy world of COVID that we all live in. And so thank you for joining us on a Friday afternoon, especially you, Sue, in the East Coast. It's a little bit later. You're a little closer to the weekend than Simon and I are. But,
it's a good way to end. Good way to end.
Yeah. And so a little fun fact, Sue and I met. I think of Sue almost as a war buddy, because we met under some interesting circumstances. I think we shook hands and then went on stage to do a dress rehearsal we were launching a product together, a social ad engine, which is the integration of Realogy's technology with the Facebook ads platform to allow agents to run ads on Facebook. And so we met, did a dress rehearsal, and then a day later, we're in front of 10,000 agents.
About 10,000, 11,000 people. Yeah, it's a baptism, right? Like you just drove right in there with me.
Yeah, baptism by fire. Yeah, and I was a very small. You had like an hour. I had about 10 minutes. So definitely, you had a lot more on your plate that day than I did. But it was one of those moments I'll literally never forget. And I don't know if I told you this, but my cousin's wife is a agent for Better Homes and Gardens. And so after we get off stage, my phone is blowing up with these texts from this person. And we don't talk that often, but she was in the crowd. And so it was this crazy moment of like, she was in the crowd and she's like, hey, that Paul Offord guy looks familiar.
That's so cool. That was fun. That was an experience when they're like, you're going to be on stage at the United Center. It's like, well, that's a little different than the norm, right? Like that was, but how much fun to have somebody, a fan in the audience. How cool. Yeah.
It's like having your mom at your show, somebody to cheer you on. But yeah, super awesome. So we've gone back a ways, and it's been awesome to follow, frankly, both your careers as you've kind of moved up the ladder in Realogy. And maybe a good place to start is, I don't know about you guys, but if I rewound the clock a year ago, let's say we're in Q2 of 2020, right? I don't know if I would have predicted we'd be where we are right now in terms of the market and such a hot moment. I literally talked to two people today that have bought between them 3 different homes, right? There's just a appetite to kind of rethink your situation with COVID making the virtual work environment more acceptable. I think there's just been a lot of movement. So I'm just curious, your 2 cents on kind of what you're seeing in the market. What do you think is driving this? And if there's any trends that you think are going to continue, beyond COVID from just a consumer perspective.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and then Simon, who also has bought and sold a little bit during this time frame as well. I'm one of the many that seem to you would think I'd have an in, like every house I see, I'm like, oh, I want it, and they're like, it's under contract. So, that started last summer and is continuing all the way through. And you're right. I mean, look, we started 2020 pretty strong. I mean, it was a strong market, and then the world sort of came to a halt there. Probably by the end of Q2, we were starting to see those signs of us coming back out. But no, I don't think anybody would have predicted such unbelievable demand in our industry being unlocked kind of through this pandemic. And, of course we can look macro and we see the interest rates have been phenomenal, and, all of these things that are occurring that are helping, but there's just been some significant societal shifts that we lasted and still in many ways are in some version of this pandemic. I think because we were in them for so long, are long-term things that are likely to go beyond trends. And so I think that, for example, is the work from home. You touched on it. The estimates are 25 to 30% of the entire workforce will be some version of virtual or hybrid by the end of this year. So that really changes where a person is tethered to, right? I mean, you're seeing a ton of that. We're seeing a lot of suburban movement. So a lot of people I know and see, and not just personally, but sort of in the data and agents I talk to, people are moving from one house in their town to just a bigger house in their town, or the house that has the pool that they never thought they wanted, or that has an office now because they have been able to and maybe forced to rethink what they're using their home for today, right? Just the entirety of home kind of as a definition has changed. And so you have this culmination of the economics with the low interest rates occurring with significant rethinking of where you have to be, and it's been really interesting to watch, and we're seeing that momentum continue. So it's been some long-term shifts that I think will change, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit later about the consumer themselves and how they've changed through this process. But Simon?
Oh, I agree. So this is actually a house we moved into relatively recently because, spending a year or so in lockdown with now an extended sort of family unit, because my mother-in-law moved in with us as well, things started feeling really crowded. We had, another baby just before coronavirus. And so just even watching things like her growing up under quarantine for all of that time, right? Not being able to travel and not being able to even socialize is really interesting. But kind of like we were talking about in the, quote unquote, green room, things like Zoom, right? Or, Microsoft Teams or what have you, we're probably going to use them less once everybody sort of gets back out there and is, touching bellies and shaking hands and all that sort of stuff. But it has become sort of destigmatized, if you will, to have a Zoom call. So for example, if you're a senior leader like Sue is, before COVID, if you wanted to, meet and greet Sue, then Sue had to fly on a plane to go meet and greet with you, right? Mm-hmm. Which means physically Sue could only be in so many places at so many times over the course of a year. And that's the math that any sort of senior leader has to do in order to sort of, figure out who they have to, who they can spend the time to basically go and meet with. Whereas now with, Zoom being, acceptable, or at least more acceptable, you can meet with a lot more people and have some of these interactions without having to physically be there. And it becomes harder to justify spending 12 hours on a plane, mm-hmm. right? To get to somewhere for 45 minutes of a meeting or what have you, when you could do, 10 meetings basically in that same sort of time frame. So I think there's going to be a paradigm shift in terms of how we all use our time. And I think it's probably a good thing.
I think it's a great thing. It's a huge prioritization thing. And sorry, Keith, I'll just add to that, Simon, when you think about the need for senior leaders, the need for people to connect at the very beginning of the pandemic and share information, and yet we couldn't leave our homes. I was able to do town halls and meetings with agents from 7 different states in one day. Now, I really want to get back out and meet people. I'm looking forward to doing so and starting to get back on the road, but there is an efficiency to how we work that's become ingrained in us now, I think, for sure.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And we're doing the same process at Facebook. Like, I don't know, but I would imagine kind of business travel, at least for us, probably not starting in any meaningful way until next year. I would imagine but we've realized there's a lot more you can get done, and there's a lot more from a relationships perspective you can build over VCs, and it allows you to have more flexibility in your personal life. Like, we all have kids, and so one of the things we all know, if you look at the data, is that like burnout is very real at all levels of an organization and is not sustainable. And so if there's ways in which we can leverage technology to have even the same amount of impact, but ideally more, and still have the flexibility to go to your kid's soccer game or whatever, or not be on that 6-hour cross-country flight. Like those are huge. And so I'm really excited about that. I also think that the data we're seeing from housing calls out how important what we all do, but mainly what you guys do in terms of the community. The fact that it's such an important element of the foundations really of your life, of the community that you live in, the home you're in. And I think being in your home for over a year has kind of reinforced that. And it's interesting to see how resilient it's been. I think if you look back to the last kind of real major economic crisis, if you think of like 2008, homes was kind of on the leading edge of that, where this time it's really been one of the more resilient aspects, especially when you compare it to retail and some of these other things. Commercial, is another one. So this has been fascinating to watch, and I think technology has played a big role in that. So Simon, maybe starting with you as the resident tech guy, like what are some of the things that you've seen as trends from a agent perspective, from a use of technology, similar to what we were just talking about with executives, but how are agents getting more thoughtful about leveraging technology in this COVID era?
It's a great question, and it's great to have our perspective as Realogy, which is the largest, obviously, and the resources that sort of come with that. Because what we were seeing as we were going out and talking to agents, even during COVID, is that when you're suddenly by yourself and you're not interacting with the rest of your group, regardless of your brokerage size, you start to realize what you have and what you don't have in terms of tools in your bag, right? And so being affiliated with a larger brand, or being affiliated with a larger brand that's part of Realogy, allows for a much broader sort of set of tools for them to be able to carry in their bag, and therefore, more ways to be competitive, right? And stay competitive even when the market is sort of down, or, if heaven forbid you're locked up in your house or whatever, right? So, so as an example, we had the learning platform, which we rolled out the year before COVID, right? Which was a web-based, basically, platform where we could serve content up. COVID hits, everybody freaks out, right? And we're like, oh my gosh, is there even going to be a business? Let alone what are we going to do? Sort of past the recovery, right? And so, the learning team very quickly sort of created 13 new courses of like, well, this is what you do during lockdown, right? Like, you're going to have like 100 days, basically, once the recovery happens. Who knows what the recovery is going to look like? We didn't know that it would look like this, right? You're going to have 100 days, basically, to reestablish your book of business. Why don't you do that now? Like, get your prospects in the funnel, right? Virtually go through their house. And it's acceptable right now to just do something like, hey, Mr. and Ms. Homeowner, could you just walk around your house on a Zoom call or something like that with me, so that I can get a sense for, how your property shows and all that sort of stuff, just so that we can do that research, so that when we finally can get together, right, it'll be that much more valuable. So instead of like letting that, that time be dead time, actually let our agents differentiate themselves as being, forward thinking, technology enabled, having the ability to be able to transact even though it's all virtual, right? And go and claim customers that way. And I think the results speak for themselves. I mean, if you look at our earnings, you look at our results compared to the NAR national averages, we're outperforming the averages, right? And the learning platform is certainly only one aspect of it. There are a lot of other ones from across the enterprise, but we as Realogy really focused on, let's use this as, instead of like, oh my gosh, let's just shelter and duck and cover, right? Like, use this as an opportunity, really, from a competitive position, to be able to do it. It's kind of like me as an investor. I'm buying a lot these days, right? Because some folks are looking to get out of their situations or do whatever and stuff like that. And if you have the resources to do it, you should do it now, so that you can ride the wave back up and obviously benefited from it. And I think that's what we've sort of seen. 200,000 agents took that training between like March. Actually, it wasn't built probably until like May, June, right? Yeah. So between like June and the end of the year, 200,000 agents, which is basically like our entire domestic footprint, right, took that training and outperformed. We're seeing the metrics outperform their peers as a result of that and many other things, right? But I thought it was really interesting that we were able to like that quickly respond to what was going on out there, get the relevant content out there, and then people are sitting around their homes trying to figure out what to do with themselves, and they sucked it up, right? And they're performing as a result of it.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that are super interesting about what you said is, one, the platform, like, and that's the core here, right? And I think obviously it applies to Realogy in large organizations, Facebook included, but it also implies if you're running a team, like you need to have that system in place to build upon. Because if you had just had 13 courses ready to go, that's great. But if you don't have that platform in place, it doesn't scale. And so that's some of the role of technology from what I've seen is like building a scalable platform that where you can add things on as the business and the needs change. And I also think there's a line, a kind of saying at Facebook, which is like never waste a crisis, right? And so I think this is another one. Like if everybody's not home, probably you don't get the massive adoption of that learning platform at that moment, right? Exactly. And you had the playbook in place. You're able to quickly create the content, and then you took advantage of this unique opportunity to get people to absorb that, and then you're seeing the results down the road. And so I think that's a really important lesson for anybody. If you're running your own business, if you've got a team under you, if you're running a brokerage, is right, thinking ahead and building the planks. You don't know what's going to come.
Absolutely.
I'm curious too, on the, so you got 200,000 agents just in the US, right? So, something like that. Obviously that you've been in a virtual remote world for a long time, being the leader of this massive organization, right? And so now that we're all in this environment where, there's people on my team, for example, who I've been working with for a year and a half, who I've never been in the same room with, right? But that's kind of been the case for you for a while in your role. And so I'm curious, how you're thinking about culture and community and things like that in a world where the go-to, we'll do a happy hour, I'll go visit the office, those types of things are less available and less scalable. So how are you thinking through those aspects?
It's a very, very consistent topic of conversation within Realogy. And, you mentioned the cocktail hour. It's funny how many of those boxes of like cocktails showed up at my house did you get these? Like I can't remember what they were called, because we were doing virtual cocktail hours, and we would have the stuff show up at your house, and you'd bake a cocktail and you'd do it on Zoom. And, that kind of got us through. But it does leave you sort of wanting that experience again, and this is a relationship business. Look, we are going to leverage the learnings, and we will continue to do so, of the technology. And that's how we're going to be better. Technologically enabled agents are going to continue to outperform those who are not. But you still need to be around people. And so, I have historically spent a tremendous amount of time on the road. I do not necessarily see going back to that. I think culture needs to live through an intentional focus on the connection with your people. And that connection can live through many ways. We talk a lot about how do we talk, the executive committee, my leadership team, we've tried doing some, meeting free Friday afternoons, because we all got meetinged out. Somehow it was like, those 30 hours I'd spend on planes are somehow now 30 hours on, meetings during the week. It's crazy. So doing, so setting that as an expectation and a tone, just being virtual changed our culture tremendously. We were a company that you were kind of expected to be in the office every day if you weren't on the road. Even just making that acceptable, to saying it's acceptable that your dog just ran through the back. Hey, Winston, right? That's my dog. Very different culturally than where we were. But doing the meeting-free afternoons, setting aside space to connect that is completely not work-related, leading conversations with your teams we try and start with a win. We did this before, but I try to be very focused on that. There's going to be the back in person, but I think I've said it like 3 times now, but it's intentional. It is focusing on making room for just the connections. And I do have people that have started in this. I haven't met some of my team. I was in Utah last week with some of my Century 21 folks, and it was the first time I'd seen them or even, which is great. And that's so important. So it's also a reminder that as you hire people, as you expand in a digital, in a more virtual environment, what is the onboarding of those folks? How do you make that water cooler connection? So it's carving out, maybe an hour every month where it's all new employees get together and have time with the executive committee. Maybe it's because you have to you have to be mindful of it. And I've worked virtually or remotely for significant swaths of my career. I used to live in Jersey and work from home, and my company was in California and my team was all over the country. So, I sort of grew up in that environment, so I'm more comfortable with it. But the flip side is knowing a lot of people are not. And so, even to Simon's training point, we've launched training programs for our leaders, for our managers on how to manage in this environment, how to identify when somebody's having, if you're at work and somebody's not having a great run of things, you can kind of tell if you see them every day. It's important to pick up on subtle cues if you're this, and so that's important. Still doing that. And look, in our offices, and your agents will know that our brokerage offices are open and people are there, and the coming back to that has been amazing to see. Just really seeing the office meetings kind of pick up again and stuff, which is culture.
Yeah, and one of the things that I feel like a lot of executives and maybe people within corporate offices are dealing with, agents have been dealing with a long time, which is kind of like the breaking down of the barriers between personal and professional, right? Like I don't know about you, but I often do Zoom calls and half the people are literally in their bedrooms. I'm looking into their bedrooms while I'm taking that meeting, which is a view that, you just is very unique to the moment we're in. But as an agent,
it's unprecedented access to people's home.
Exactly.
And it should be respected, I think. But sorry, go on. What were you?
No, but it's created a new empathy, right? Like, for example, there right outside this window, there's like 10 kids going crazy in a pool. You're probably hearing that. If you're not, there's gonna probably be at some point we're talking someone screaming through the yelling for mommy or daddy, and like we've all been on those calls, and it's kind of humanized a lot of us that 100%. Way. But I guess where I'm going is agents have had to deal with that for a long time because they're taking their kid to a soccer game, but they're showing up as a parent, but they're also showing up as a member of the community and an agent. And so I think there's probably a lot that that we could learn from them, because it's a new muscle for us, and as leaders, it's a new muscle of how do we lead empathetically through this moment, knowing we're all juggling a lot of things, right? Cool. So let's you mentioned about consumer trends, and so I'm curious your take on kind of what you're seeing from consumers in this moment, and then what are the trends you think are going to kind of continue post everyone going back to normal in terms of how they're buying real estate, but also how they're interacting with your agents.
Well, and this is, and I'll let Simon add in as well, but the consumer experience, I think, is going to continue to be a more and more important aspect of the transaction. I mean, I think it always has been. I mean, without the consumer, you're not buying and selling a home, but they too have evolved through this. And one of the things that I think our business, by and large, has been slower in mass to adopt to is how different we consume everything else in our lives, right? I mean, we Uber places, and we have Grubhub and all of those things on steroids over the last year. And, we do a lot of things in a different way that we were slower to adopt in our industry. And we were forced to accelerate that to serve the consumer during the pandemic, right? We were still determined to be essential business, to your point earlier about serving communities. We do, and we needed to solve for it. So at Realogy, for example, we had been planting seeds to service the consumer in a different way, in a digital way, for a couple of years. We had invested in Notarize. We created flash close during this process to allow for the ease of closing on a transaction. So how can you, when you can't be face-to-face with somebody, close a transaction? Well, what consumer, now that they can do, I refied during the process, right? And I had this valet closing where I signed, 98% of my documents ahead of time. They came to my driveway, I signed the last two, and we were done. That was through our mortgage partner, our title company has all that. That I don't expect anybody who has gone through that experience, and by the way, nor should a company want to go back to doing it in a less efficient manner, right? So it should unlock the ability for us to do even more transactions and more business in a more more exciting, more comfortable experience for the consumer. And I think we're going to continue to see those trends. Looking through, doing 4, I think you and I talked about this when we connected at some point during the pandemic, but Facebook Live open houses. If I can go to 4 open houses in a day without leaving my house, without, packing the baby up why would, you're still going to go connect with our agent to close the transaction, to navigate the complexity. You still want to go see the neighborhood. So, I think those are the pieces that go forward with us, that make us just more efficient in our business. Simon, I don't know what you're seeing or your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, all of that. I would say, a key enabler during all of this has been social media, because everybody's connected via social media. I'd love to see the data that Facebook has in terms of numbers of people that have substantially expanded upon their social media spheres, for example, during COVID, to include, for example, more business contacts as opposed to just, family and your aunts and uncles and everything like that. Because as much as it was an enabler before, I have this, aunt that lives in Taiwan, hasn't been to the US and I don't know, whenever. She's only met my older daughter like once. But she's really feeling connected to my younger daughter because she's seeing all these pictures now on Facebook and everything like that, we couldn't have posted. We didn't have anywhere to post in the past other than mailing her, pictures periodically or whatever. So the degree of, everybody sort of, coalescing around their social media presences, right? And being able to interact with each other in little micro ways instead of needing to set up a meeting to get in your face for a half an hour or an hour or what have you, flights notwithstanding. I think is really, really interesting, really compelling, right? And it's enabling people to be able to get in front of people and have multiple sort of contacts with them without, feeling intrusive. And I think it's pretty neat. I mean, I know I've certainly, increased substantially the number of people that I'm interacting with on social just during coronavirus, and it personalizes everybody, kind of like Keith, you were saying, you're seeing people's homes, but you're also seeing their lives. You're seeing, all the things that are important to them and everything. And it's a great way. It's like you know the person if and when you actually do meet in person, the next time.
Are you seeing any, because Sue, you called this out, and I think this is right. So there was some data that was released last year that I think is fascinating. So if you look at the last 5 years, the number of overall purchases, right? And this is mostly, we're talking retail, right? This is not a real estate thing, but I think it applies. Of all the purchases that people are making, about pretty consistently over the last 5 years, about 1% has moved to e-com, right? So 1% less of people going into stores versus buying it through some online channel, right? In Q2 of last year, in the depths of kind of that first wave of COVID, we saw a 4% shift in 3 months. So in other words, we saw 4 years of transition happen in 3 months, right? And that's fascinating on a bunch of levels. But the thing that I would love to dig into with you guys is that's fundamentally changing consumers' expectation. And so you called this out with the process of refinancing. Once you've gone through this kind of drive-through refi, you're never going to want to go through it, doing it in the traditional way. And I think there is a digital, as this digital transaction happens, there's a consumer expectation for instant answers to my questions, instant gratification, instant pictures of the home or the neighborhood or things like that. And so how are you thinking about working with your agents to solve this new expectation? Because I do think it's already been happening, and I think COVID just really accelerated this. And so how are you thinking about these things from a consumer experience? And so maybe that's a Simon question, and maybe it's just general, but it's just really fascinating to me because I think everybody's expectations of connection and response time and everything else have kind of been changed.
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, to Sue's point about COVID being sort of an unfortunate, but in some ways fortunate accelerator to a lot of things, right? Like Sue sent me this snarky message during this whole COVID thing that said hey, if COVID had happened before you joined Realogy, you never would have had to move to Jersey in the first place, right? And I'm like, I'm fully aware of that.
I made him move to Jersey when I hired him. I made him move.
She did. She made me move to Jersey. We bought the house and everything. So COVID, does have sort of the silver lining to it. So we were already thinking about, so there's a disturbing NAR statistic, right? Disturbing if you're a brokerage, which is 90% of consumers say that they would work with their agent again, right after they've closed escrow, they've carried their spouse over the threshold, all that sort of stuff. But only 12% of them do after that 7 to 9 years of home ownership. So what the heck happened in between there, right? Like you loved your agent, 90% of you would use them again, right? When you close escrow, and yet only 12% of you do. So what happens in that 7 to 9 years, right? And what we found is that basically agents are really good by and large at bringing in new business, prospecting, working through all those sort of prospecting sort of channels to be able to bring in new customers. But a lot of times, most of them are not great about staying in touch with their sphere, driving repeat and referral business, right? The ones that are become friends basically to those clients, yep. Right? Like they're who you call if you need a dog walker, a nanny, a contractor referral, somebody to, like all of those sorts of things. They're your trusted home ownership advisor, right? So we were already thinking along the lines of how do we reinforce that bridge between every agent and every member of their sphere so that every agent, not just the top ones, can be that local home ownership expert basically to all those folks to drive, repeat and referral business and everything like that. And so, really COVID has helped to sort of accelerate that in terms of building out more and more business to consumer B2C, basically, connectivity points, but for our brokers and agents. Right. So put another way, there's plenty of plays out there right now that are trying to sort of disintermediate the agent, right, and go directly to the consumer. That's not us, right? We are trying to empower that connection between the agent and consumer so that they benefit from more business. And with our unique scale, obviously, we have the ability to be able to provide for that. Whereas, agents left to their own devices may not have the resources to be able to really draw in a large B2C, sort of population, or would have to spend mightily in terms of being able to maintain that sphere. So if we can sort of shoulder a lot of that burden for them, then we can increase their efficiency, make them seem, make them more responsive, provide higher service, all those sorts of things, to just really exemplify those aspects of their personalities, right? That makes them successful. So that's been an interesting sort of takeaway in terms of, doubling down on a lot of those sorts of things in order to empower our agents and brokers.
Well, and I think you're hitting at an interesting point. And as someone who works at a technology company, we put a high price or a high value on efficiency and scalability, right? Because that we're running multiple platforms that have billions of users, and so we need to think that way. Mm-hmm. But what I'm hearing you say is that relationships, especially for agents, relationships really trump efficiency, right? And so I'll use an example. If you can look at my background, I've got a bunch of music equipment. I'm a music nerd, right? I play drums, right? I could probably go to a music site online and buy a drum set and get it shipped to me in a couple of days and it'd be great, right? But I go to my local store because that person's an expert. I've worked with them for multiple years. He's going to help me think through what I'm actually trying to do. And, I might even end up paying a little more, or it might take a lot longer because he's got to order the thing that I need. But there's a relationship there that, to your point, Simon, it's been built over years, and it's a complex thing. If I was buying a t-shirt, I'd probably do that online. But if I'm buying this thing that is a complex thing that's gonna, and nothing is more complex or more meaningful than the home you live in, right? And building that relationship over time makes a ton of sense to me. And I'm curious if there is a technological element to it. So you talked about training and like, how do you kind of coach agents on making sure that between those 5 to 7 years between sales, that there's touch points along the way, even if it's not going to be a short-term payoff for them. But are you thinking about it from a technology perspective as well? Is there anything, what's the role of technology of helping build relationships? Maybe that's a better way of asking it.
So, technology is an enabler, right? So technology just makes it that much more frictionless for the consumer or the agent to engage, right? So let's see, let's use a practical example. So we partner with American Home Shield, for example, for home warranties, right? Our brokers and agents refer in sort of, home warranty policies into, transactions so that the consumer is protected if something should, heaven forbid, go wrong, right? Like the water heater blew at my house in Jersey, right? Like I viewed it as a blessing that, my
By the
agent.
way, really upset you made a move to Jersey.
You have
I'm
no
seeing that as
idea.
a pro.
I
No
am still.
idea. Everyone
you know,
out there, Jersey's not bad. It's, Simon,
it's if
stop
if you're from
yourselves.
California, and you're not used to trees and things like that, that it gets, I literally chest bumped a deer one morning when I was out jogging. Like that never would have happened in LA.
That's a great thing. That sounds awesome.
Nature. No,
Yeah.
we're Garden State, Simon.
I'm not sure which of us was more terrified, me or the deer. It was just like this crazy,
You.
crazy thing. But it definitely me. But the point is that technology can be an enabler, right? So we can create those touch points for the consumers and help the agent leverage the agent's time. Otherwise, it would have been Simon calling his agent going, "Holy cow, I'm in 6 inches of water. It's 3 a.m. And who do I reach out to that we trust and we know that can come and by 7 a.m. to fix this thing?" That week, I was in Jersey during coronavirus, actually, and literally while I was on all-day Zoom calls, 3 feet away from me is a guy replacing the water heater, and running the hose and everything like that to plumb it all out of there, right? And they were an excellent person. So, in that instance, the relationship got the policy written in, the technology enabled it. I could follow this guy coming to my house because I was literally on calls all day to know exactly when he was going to ring my doorbell, kind of like the Domino's pizza guy, right? I knew exactly where the vendor was on the app so that I would know when I could step away for a second, put myself on mute, open the door, have them walk in. All enablers basically, whereas in the old days I would have had to sit at home for all day waiting for this guy, right, to come and fix my thing, or call who knows who, going through the phone book or whatever to call just random places in the middle of the night to find them. Here I got a trusted, vetted partner that was technology enabled to make that whole process as painless as possible. And there's a million other touch points in the not just the buy and sell transaction, but the entire home ownership experience that could benefit from efficiencies. I mean, let's face it, real estate is a complex but also not a terribly gratifying experience a lot of times when you're going through the transaction. And if we can address a lot of those friction points, it's why $12 billion a year are being invested in the prop tech space, right? Because a prop tech entrepreneur walks into a VC's office and says like, "Hey, you know how the last time you bought or sold a house it sucked?" Right? And everybody in the room nods. We're here to fix that. Yeah. Right? And that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to make it so that all of our agents can provide as good of a consumer experience as possible to their spheres, and that's where technology can come into it.
Yeah, well, I think they must not have been using a Realogy branded agent. It's that terrible of an experience, just to but I think that the technology will evolve and be to Simon's point. There's a significant amount of capital, as we all know, coming into the real estate and the prop tech side of things, mainly to make the transaction more efficient. I mean, that's where we're seeing a lot of that, to ease the friction and make it more seamless. And I think that a lot of that comes not just from the digital closing and but it's also the communication process for a consumer throughout the transaction, because there are so many integrated pieces. And an agent is constantly, right, like pulling from like 14 different things between, the inspection company, the the title, like you've got all of these. So how can we provide to the agent an opportunity to ease that with their consumer, right? I mean, I remember 10 years ago or whenever it was, I'm probably dating myself, either too old or too young here, some way, never too young. But when it was like, remember to ask your consumer, like, does your seller want to be contacted via text? Because not everybody wants a phone call anymore, right? Yep. I see that evolving to the next level of how does your consumer want to interact with you? Do they even want to text, or do they just want to log on somewhere? And that's where Simon's kind of vision in totality goes from the beginning through the life cycle of the relationship, where the agent is controlling that relationship, but in a super efficient and seamless way, providing value add to, the homeowner. And that builds that trusted relationship, in a different way. I just think that's an opportunity to leverage and bridge that technology and relationship in a way that's valuable to all sides.
Yeah, and what I loved about your story, Simon, is it was a great experience for you as a consumer, but it was actually significantly less work than the old way if it was an agent, if you were calling the, and so it really is the definition of a win-win there, which is like, if the agent can deliver better results and support, and frankly get credit for that, that's the other piece too, is like making sure that it's tied back to, oh wow, I wouldn't have had that if I wasn't with this agent. Right. And the agent doesn't have to lift a finger. That's pretty amazing.
Well, especially in this.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, especially in this seller's market right now, where it's quite common for buyers to say, like, look, I don't even need to see the house, right? I'll take it. I mean, they're not doing the inspections. They're leaving a lot of things, frankly, unknown.
Yep.
That something like a home warranty, for example, would help to sort of at least mitigate some of that risk for them. That was my point.
And I would just say too, because you're right, Simon, with what we're seeing right now with buyers waiving certain things, look, the agent is so critical in that transaction process to have a very real conversation. And look, you're being a trusted advisor to this buyer, the seller, the buyer, depending on your side. And there's an opportunity to add value even during a time when you're trying to, it's difficult to close on that home, and maybe willing to do some things that then in a different time you didn't. I was out to dinner the other night with some girlfriends, two of which are in the home, in the process of selling homes, and one's buying, and they're like, oh, do you have a cleaning lady, or do you have a plumber? Because I'm moving here. I said, ask your realtor. Like, I know nothing about the town you're moving to. And I said, but your realtor should have, sure enough, called up, they had the whole list of people, the opportunities, and that's a tremendous value that feels really sort of pedestrian. But if there's a way to automate that and make that value add to the customer in a different way, it's great.
Yeah, and it's a missed opportunity for the agent, even from a marketing perspective. Like, we see it on our platform. Agents are really obsessed with the prospecting and the lead gen aspects of what they can do on our platform, and they should be, right? That's important. I don't want to dismiss that, but that shouldn't be the only thing they're doing. And marketing to people in their community about services, or who they are, or why they should be trusted, or what they stand for as an agent, those are all really important, because consumers are trusting agents with the most important financial decision that they're going to make. And if it's all about kind of lead, but there's not enough why behind it, or consistency of messages. And so, there's a lot of things that agents could be doing and can offer consumers that consumers don't think of agents for, right? And I think that's an opportunity, and something we're thinking a lot about as well. So you had mentioned prop tech. There's all this money going into prop tech. Compass has gone public, so you can kind of get under the hoods of their financials. Like, do you guys spend a lot of time thinking about your competitive set in terms of like growth? How do you think about, as you look into the next year and beyond, kind of growth for the business? Like, what are the things you're focused on?
Yeah, growth from the business or growth from technology?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Well, let's do both.
Why don't you lead off, Sue, on the growth for the business, and I'll talk about tech.
We don't spend a significant amount of time focusing on our competitors. We focus, I think any good business leader tries to look at what somebody's doing and maybe why, right? And if there's somebody coming in, and this may be somewhat on the tech side as well, like, what problem are you trying to solve? If you're trying to disrupt something, why? And how can I maybe learn from that and do it candidly better, because I have more resources and scale and opportunity. I love competition. I'm a fiercely competitive person. We're a publicly traded company. We're always focused on growth and doing it the right way, and being transparent about that. I think we're going to continue to look at, I'm focused on, obviously, the growth of all of our brands, helping our entrepreneur broker owners out there grow their businesses, leverage some of the key learnings we have as a massive company to help them, focus on their margins and growing that way, and helping agents get, we talked leads, not just leads, but conversions, right? How do we increase the warm leads that are coming through, the convertible leads? And of course, capture rates of in my ancillary, sort of in our title and our mortgage businesses as well. But I think that from a growth perspective, it's taking some of these learnings, a lot of what we're talking about today, providing tools to our agents that can help them do business, get closer to the consumer. We've recently expanded our RealSure platform into another 21 states just over the last several weeks. Real-Vitalize, so doing those things that we are uniquely qualified to do to help the agent gain more business, and importantly, through all of that, stay at the center of the transaction, right? I mean, to me, it's about helping our agents close more business, because that's, I don't sell houses, they do, and so I need to ensure, and that's one of the beauties of our company too, having both the own side and franchise is, we learn a lot every day from running the business. We are in this business and it's in our DNA, and so we're uniquely positioned to do that. And Simon is even more so, having, been a broker and being licensed and taking all of those learnings to inform our product set, which is all focused on growth, and doing so through enabling our agents to do more business. But Simon?
Yeah. So you started the question off with sort of, how much do we follow the competition and everything? And to Sue's point, I mean, we don't spend a lot of time sort of focusing on the competition, but we certainly want to see, where there might be elements of value for the agents or the consumers that we might want to, add if we don't have those already. I think for us, we're actually leading the way in a lot of ways from a technology front, because we have this concept of an open ecosystem, whereas the majority of our competitors have a closed ecosystem. We've been there, we've seen that movie, and frankly, it's not the best, right? Because especially when you have 6 brands and 300,000 agents globally, you're never going to be able to build everything for everyone, right? And that's what we always got into those conversations with, was agents saying like, why is it this or that? Why can't it be this and that, right? And so the whole point of the open ecosystem, instead of us being the rate limiting factor to innovation, because that's what you become if you have a closed ecosystem, we're embracing with, instead of competing against all the best of breed solutions that are out there, and unifying them all on one platform, so that you're actually able to have parallel evolution, right, from all of these parties doing their thing and doing it as effectively as possible, right? And then our secret sauce as a platform, kind of like Facebook, is that we're the unifying sort of hub, right? Like, we have the draw that all of these vendors want to connect to, so they all want to get connected to us. And we're able to, for example, we just did this deal recently with MoxieWorks, right? Like, best of breed solution. It is one of the options available to our brokers and agents out there. And I had a broker call me and say, well, gee, if other competitors can offer Moxie, for example, then like, what is the unique differentiator for me offering Moxie to like agents or what have you, right? And I said, well, true, they can offer a version of Moxie. However, Moxie, by nature of it being connected to our open ecosystem and the integrations that result from that, kind of like our integration with Facebook, right, to provide for you all the data so that it's as seamless and easy for the agent to run those ads as possible. They don't have to do anything. Here's what it's going to look like. Push the button and boom, it's there, right? Like, never underestimate convenience, right? In terms of being compelling for anybody, And so the integration of Moxie into this ecosystem, the integration to all of the other vendors' tools and everything like that, and the data that, they all mutually benefit from, is tremendously compelling, right? Put another way, if we didn't integrate it, they would have to themselves. And that is, a technologically thorny sort of problem to solve for, brokerage, regardless of their size. And it's something that really only somebody as big as us, is able to do it effectively, right? But that does give, us and our agents and our brokers unique insights, because now we're analyzing the pooling of all of that data, right, around the consumer, around the agents, around the transactions, in a way that, you wouldn't be able to do if you're on a node somewhere out here in a single point solution, right? Or in a monolithic solution or what have you. And so we're really excited by that. And we're already seeing huge dividends basically being paid out as a result of, creating this open ecosystem. Just the pace of innovation is just so much faster,
Yeah, it's one of the most, coming into real estate from a technology background, one of the most interesting disconnects I saw was the lack of value that a lot of real estate companies put on, and agents put on scale, right? And the ability to learn faster together than learning by myself, right? And I think what you're talking about is like, Yeah, we could all build it ourselves. That would be really expensive and we'd be the bottleneck. Our dev team would be the bottleneck to building new stuff. Or we could bring in best in class solutions, but still take advantage of that scale to make kind of the rising tide lift all boats, right? And I still feel like there's work to be done to tell that story and get agents to understand, yes, me being part of this larger system helps everybody in the system, but it helps me the most. And I can move faster and I'm going to get better tools quicker, all those things. I actually think arguably it's more important than what a lot of traditional real estate companies that are large have hung their hat on historically, which has been brand. Because I think what we're seeing is that your consumer experience, which is largely tied more and more so to technology, and consumer in this case could be like your customer, which are agents or end consumers. The technology stack is such a huge driver of brand favorability and awareness, because if you leverage technology to deliver great experiences for people, that really is one of the best brand things you can do versus a TV ad or frankly a Facebook ad, right? Those types of things.
And incredibly costly for them to try to do it themselves.
Yeah, you can't. Right.
I mean, not just costly, but the expertise and everything. Yeah. And that's the top 1% maybe of brokerages that would have the resources, the expertise, and the volume to justify it, to do it, right? Which doesn't make a lot of sense.
And I think it's, you just touched on something, Keith, which I think about a lot, because, running brands, there's a value in the brand and a trust and a consumer awareness that you don't want to squander, you want to protect. But are you brand building, or are you taking stuff that builds the value within that brand? And that has certainly changed. I've been in this industry 25 years-ish. It has changed in that evolution over time from, I just need a good brand, to, man, I need a brand that delivers value to me in a way that is relevant to the agent today and to their customer today. And that's where that technology bridge that Simon, that you talk about, that we all talk about, is so important today, and growing import, because it feeds the engine. It makes the data makes the products better. It makes the systems better. It makes the agents better. And the more info, the more data being pulled in, the better that opportunity. And I think that you're right. Coming into the industry, when you did, there wasn't a lot of talk of that, right? And I think it's been an acceleration. And it's been very eye-opening for folks, but it does allow for, and I talk about that with the team a lot, Realogy is in a unique position because of our scale, but we've got to leverage that scale where it matters, right? And it's not in necessarily building everything. It's partnering with best in breed, but then building where that unique scale differentiates us and allows us to execute on something better than anybody else can come close to. And that's that balance that we're constantly doing. And it's exciting, but it's all ultimately to benefit the agents.
That's right. And similar, the brands that sit within your roof, like Coldwell Banker wants to differentiate themselves from everybody, but also Sotheby's, right? And people within the, and so finding that balance of where does it make sense for them to come together at the Realogy level, right? To make everybody better. Where does it make sense to offer customization and uniqueness? Because, and I think your point is really, really, frankly, better said than I said, which is really that brand needs to be this, similar to like culture, it needs to be this thing that's alive and invested in every aspect of the organization, or else, it doesn't really hold true, right? And that's true for agents as well as kind of.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep. And the brands are unique, and they have different cultures, and they have different voice, and and I want to protect that fiercely. Yep. And I can do that, and I can serve them better when I'm able to leverage scale in other areas that can then be, sort of compartmentalized as needed to help others. And that's an evolution, and that's a thinking differently. And, just like Simon, and we talk about the open ecosystem, I think it's just a brilliant way to address the needs. Agents are all unique. Every individual person is unique. We don't want to have to do everything, exactly the same as other people. And while there are a couple best of breed things, go ahead and use them. That's not the value I'm providing you access to. It is the value I'm giving you. It's not locking you into one thing over the other. So I think there's, we've learned, and that's the beauty of who we are. And it's fun. It's an exciting time for sure.
Yeah. And then I'm just curious, like, Simon, you think about the open ecosystem. How do you think about, all right, this is an experience or technology or a platform we need to own because it's core to who we are, versus we can bring in a best in breed. Like, how do you think about when to make that call?
It's a great question. And, we've in creating the open ecosystem, spent a lot of time thinking about it, right? And the way it's, most clearly sort of delineated in my mind is, if it's a commoditized function that, there's a bunch of folks competing out there, Realogy doesn't need to get into that game, right? Like, we don't need to own it. We don't need to whatever, let's just partner with those folks and let our brokers and agents choose which, best of breed solutions they want to do. But the platform itself, the interconnectivity of it all, right? As well as, first party, as we call them, solutions, like, products or solutions that, leverage all of that platform to be able to be unique. So for example, data visualization, or some of the AI that we're using, some of the data insights, the the metadata that's created from all that we can then feed back to our partners, right, in a way that they were not able to get elsewise. We do those sorts of things, or foundational elements, right, like clean MLS data that's feeding into all of those systems, right, which is a huge pain in our industry. There's a bunch of efforts to try to create that clean database, but they have a hard time doing it because they're not brokers. Well, guess what? We're brokers, right? It's for our own and our brokers and agents' benefits. And so we are able to aggregate it and then feed, the various systems with our clean, centralized data that everybody's working from, so they don't have to deal with all those issues of, just erroneous data or untimely data or what have you. So, powering the platform is the core focus of, of my teams, right? And then obviously within the brands, then they can spend their time on building out, to Sue's point, right, the experiences, the culture, the value propositions that are unique to the brands, without having to worry about the plumbing. So it may not be as sexy in some ways, but it's it's essential, right, for us to be efficient at our scale.
So infrastructure, I'm fascinated with the infrastructure because it's the hidden thing that makes everything else power. And it's one of those things. I heard one of the product leaders describe it as like, it's hard, when you have quality, but it's hard to put into words what it is, right? And sometimes it's invisible. Like, a really good infrastructure means that no one's complaining about it. Like, that's the win, right? It's like exactly Zoom. Right. I say it all the time about Zoom. Like, the best experience, the best thing you can say about a video conference call is like, oh, it was fine, right? Versus like, oh, I kept getting dropped or whatever. That's makes a lot of sense. I mean, just to kind of, I guess, take it at one level down for some of the agents. What I'm hearing is you guys are the platform. You're the operating system, right? You're the iPhone with the operating system, and then the best in class solutions are the apps that agents can choose whether they want on the phone or not.
That's right. And just like with Android, just like with iPhone, they may choose to build some of those apps as well, right? So it doesn't mean necessarily that they're not providing for some of those solutions. But if other folks can do it better and more intelligently or whatever, then let them.
Yeah.
And I also look at it as, and I might have even said this when we were on stage as we opened the conversation with, you get an iPhone or your Android, and I happen to have both, so I'm one of those people.
Oh, wow.
It comes preloaded with a weather app, right? Yeah. That may be fine for you. That may be all you need, right? But you may be like, I'm totally a Weather Channel kind of girl or whatever, like, or whatever, Weather Bug or whatever bot. I don't know what the other ones are out there. I'm promoting none. I'm just sharing them. But you can go and download them. And Apple doesn't say, or Android, they don't say, no, you can't. You have to use mine. Like, what a terrible experience that is. And so I think that's how I like to describe the way in which Simon is building our platform and our offering to our agents. And it really does bring it down to that sort of like, oh, well, that makes total sense, right? Like, I love some of the pre-populated, and others, I want the other one. I want something different. I want to add in, and you know what? That's totally fine. We're going to help you do that.
No, 100%. Like, Apple's mail client, I think, is garbage compared to like Gmail or even Outlook for work stuff. So they give me the option to choose that. Other people feel differently. Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming to the end of time, and I want to be sensitive, especially after Sue was talking about no meetings Friday afternoon, and here I am with this. So,
I fail at that rule, but I don't require my team to do them.
So yeah, I just, we have a few minutes left. I really appreciate the conversation and frankly, the partnership with Facebook. It really means a lot. But I want to offer you guys a parting word. We've got a lot of brokers and agents, some within your network, maybe some without, any advice, thoughts you want to share with them, as broad or as specific as you want to go?
I'll start, if you would, just as a shout out to our hosts and appreciation, but not as a way to suck up at all. I think there's more ways to use social ad engine than how we're currently using it, right? So like it was created basically to advertise a listing, okay? We've actually used it to great success to like mine an existing sphere. So to the top of the call, right, where we're talking about using it to basically bring on board new customers. What about the existing customers, basically, and reaching out to them with whatever message you want, whether it's, agent recruiting or retention, or whether it's, an agent's own sphere of people in order to drive repeat and referral business, or just to, give them insights and wisdom into, their local home ownership expertise or what have you. An extremely cost-effective way, because then that audience is so much smaller. I don't care how big of a dog you are in the market, right? Your sphere is, in the tens of thousands of people as opposed to hundreds, millions, and billions. So extremely effective way to reach the people where they live, literally, right? Because they leave Facebook open all day, every day, and get your messages across to them in a way that doesn't feel intrusive. And so, we've been playing with that with social ad engine with great results. And so, explore more ways and more use cases basically for those sort of advertising, channels. And I think they're going to see great results as well.
Yeah, love it. Sue, turn it over to you.
Very, very, very astute, Simon, and so true. I think, look, I would just say we've just come through an insane time, and some of us are in it. Some of us have been impacted in ways we'll never sort of come away from the same, but take the learnings forward. Think about how we have evolved, how agile and resilient our agents, all of you were during this time to create, like sort of a market that we've never seen, and carry that forward and build upon it, right? Think about different ways, connect with your sphere in a more efficient and effective way. Embrace the technology opportunities to augment the already amazing way you do your business. And I would also say, keep your eye on other industries. See how other industries are evolving. You made the comment about the online, the e-commerce. It's astounding how quickly really things can change. And so keep an eye out, and see. And I'm assuming the group of agents that are on this call and those listening are tuned in and paying attention. But if you look outside our industry, you can see where things are headed. And you can just think about the ease and the efficiency and the experience. And that's exciting. And you want to make sure you're educating yourself and you're partnering with somebody who's doing the same to continuously move us forward. But it's been fun. Thank you so much for having us. And True, thank you always for your partnership and insights. It's great.
Oh, this is great. I could spend another hour just picking your brain on different things, but I know you have a life and things to get to. But this has been great. Really appreciate your time. And yeah, we'll chat soon. And
Absolutely.
For the folks listening, I was told I didn't mention this last time. We also post these on YouTube. So if you want to kind of rewind back to a brilliant thing that Sue or Simon said, or more to the point, fast forward me kind of droning on about something, you can do that on YouTube. It'll also be on Facebook. So thanks for listening and have a great weekend, everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Take care.
Bye.